Hey everybody, it's Ben Farrow, trying a new experiment. Just wanted to have afternoon drinks together and story time, and we're going to try this out. So I'm planning to do this probably every afternoon. Time might vary. If there's a time that works better for you, just let me know. So I'm going to be reading from my novel, The Dream World Collective. It's fun and light, and I've got my delicious Formosa oolong with me, and you might hear my girls in the background, and that's delightful. So grab a drink, sit back, and let's have fun together. Chapter 1, Ponderings Afoot. Michael Zenikowitz, known to his friends as Zen, woke up at 4:23 a.m. with a brilliant idea. He left his sleeping hammock, which was bolted to the walls in one corner of his bedroom ceiling, and swung along a rope ladder to his working hammock, which was bolted to the opposite corner of the ceiling. He opened a worn lap desk, pulled out 5 beautiful sheets of ivory resume paper and an ultrafine black Sharpie, and began writing. Dear Mr. D in 5B, I observed you yesterday picking up an empty beer can from the sidewalk, an unexpected reminder that there are humans among us. You are a true gentleman and a rare breed in the rushing anonymity of this city and century. I'm heartened to find that chivalry is alive and well even as we enter this bold new millennium. If you would ever like to share a cup of tea, please do not hesitate to knock on my door. Your servant, Zen in 3A. This took perhaps a quarter of the page. Zen tore it off and began again on the blank remainder. Dear brown-haired girl in 5A, I guess we haven't met yet, but we should. You look like someone who loves life. Whenever I see you, it seems like you're actually happy to be you, and your glow rubs off. Keep smiling, and stop by for a cup of tea if you ever feel like it. Zen in 3A. P.S. If you happen to like baking, I will show you an unorthodox but highly successful biscuit recipe of my own invention. He tore this off as well and began again. Dear Mrs. Valdez, thank you for the lovely chat the other day. Your history is fascinating, and it sounds like your husband was a great man. I still need to hear about your years together in Argentina before the war, though, and this time it is my turn to host you. Please come by at your convenience, and I will give you a cup of my favorite new Darjeeling blend, and, if your timing is good, a homemade cookie. Sincerely, Zen in 3A. This completed the first page. Zen started immediately on the second without even stopping to breathe. Dear Max in 4A, we stopped by the mailboxes the other day, and you struck me as an interesting guy. I'm sort of old-fashioned and think neighbors should actually know each other, so if you're ever in the mood for a good cup of tea and gourmet snackage of some sort, come downstairs and see if I'm home. Zen in 3A. Hi, Kristen. Incidentally, fun little side note, Max in 4A is a little shout out to a character who was originally going to be one of the 5 main characters, and then turned out to be a jerk, and he wasn't after all. The next was to his floor mates in apartment 3B. Dear Marco and Daniela, you guys are the best. Thank you for the box of Earl Grey lavender you left by the door yesterday. I sat on the rooftop listening to the clouds as I drank my first cup. No cream, light sugar, iced, per your recommendation, and it is truly the best iced tea ever. I'm considering setting aside the 30th of September as an annual commemoration, complete with festive decorations, dancing, fires, and the release of many small live birds and/or squirrels. I'm planning another philosophical dinner for Thursday evening. You two are some of my very favorite people, and I would love to have your company at dinner and long into the evening. In anticipation, Zen. And so the letters continued, the paper torn rough at the end or beginning of each, one to every resident in the apartment building. When they were done, Zen folded the smooth side edges of each letter into the center, and, using a lighter he kept for that purpose, melted a few drops of sealing wax onto each one and stamped them with a crisp rectangular seal bearing the letter Z. He swung down from the hammock onto a floor covered knee-deep in pillows, slipped into pajama bottoms and a white t-shirt, waved goodbye to his roommate Alex, who was getting ready for work, and padded barefoot into the hallways to deliver his letters. For the 5th time in the last 3 days, he didn't notice the paper taped to his front door. At the same time, and not too far away, Zen's old roommate Otto Van Munster sat blissfully awake in the screen-lit shadows of his attic room. Otto did not know that he was also Zen's future roommate. In fact, he did not have any particular desire, in fact, to be anyone's roommate, though he had no issue with people in principle. Other people, like mushrooms or French films, were all well and good for those who preferred that sort of thing, but best enjoyed outside one's private domain. Had he known that he was about to have not one but several roommates, it would have caused him more than a little distress. Luckily, some changes in life come completely without warning. Instead, Otto sat contentedly, pizza in one hand as the other flashed over his keyboard, programming on one widescreen monitor, rating on another, and watching From Russia with Love on a third. Otto could type 60 words per minute with his left hand, 90 with his right, and close to 200 on a good day with both. He was just hitting his groove when he heard a quiet knocking at the door. He tried to ignore it and typed on. After an uncertain moment, there was another knock, timid and determined. Otto resisted it, but the mental image of Mrs. Dunden in her pink nightdress, white hair in curlers, hand hovering, face full of aged concern, was enough to melt a steelier conscience than his. He finished his line of code, put down his pizza, paused the movie, AFK'd, took off his headset, and heaved his body out of the gargantuan beanbag that served him as chair, bed, and sometimes laundry hamper. Mrs. Dunden was standing exactly as he had pictured her. She squinted up at him without her glasses, confused and uncertain. "Otto, I saw the lights under your door." She framed her words slowly, chewing over each one. "Are you having trouble sleeping again?" "No, Mrs. D. I just stayed up to take care of a couple." "Why don't you come down and I'll make you a nice cup of milk and chamomile," she continued, feeling for his fat fingers with her cold, fragile hands. "No, Otto glanced back with helpless longing. His guild was at a critical part of the raid. They'd need him there casting mass heals, and Sean Connery was about to, be Sean Connery. He tried to pull away from the bony, clutching fingers of Mrs. D. "Don't worry, dear. You can sit with me at the table and we'll have a nice warm drink and we'll talk about it." The generation gap, Mrs. Dunden's elderly determination, and her poor hearing combined to make Otto's protests completely ineffective. And he didn't have the heart to forcibly wrench his hand out of hers and, lock her out of her own attic apartment? He sighed and followed her downstairs for another earnest, one-sided conversation over weird, old-fashioned drinks. It was 4:30 in the morning when Sushi started painting. Sometimes she painted this late because inspiration had struck, because she was in the zone and it was better to paint than to sleep or eat or think. This night was different. She'd gained her second wind at 2 o'clock and lost it an hour later. She'd used up the last of her inspiration all the way back around midnight, with her boss's voice still echoing in her angry brain. "We'll need the simpler, Maria. Right to the point. Smack Joe Schmo right between the eyes," while the client nodded. "It's pretty, but we're looking for something with a little more impact. Maybe if we just make the burger bigger and cut out the dancers in the background?" And then Rose, that little bimbo-headed bimbo, had chimed in, cooing poison. "Yes, I really think the background is too busy. After all, people only see billboards for a few seconds. We all know you're a great artist, Maria, but maybe this isn't the place to show it off so much." So she'd started nearly from scratch, again. Made the burger bigger, higher contrast, brighter colors, bigger words. "Yum, yum, yum, it's..." And the burger read one of her frustrated revisions around 1:30, and her roommate Summer had come home then, and laughed a darkly cheerful laugh at the design and said something friendly and sarcastic about ad agencies. And Sushi had agreed and thought again about quitting the internship. But she'd pulled herself together, even though she'd thrown 60 hours at it already just this week, because the deadline was 3 days ago, and this had to be done, and walking away from her first job would be resume suicide. By 4:20, the billboard design was dumbed down enough to make even the dullest shake-sucking, phone-yapping driver unthinkingly crave a burger, and Sushi had saved it with a snarl of disgust and sent it with a polite one-line email to her boss and their client, and found herself blinking at the computer screen, knowing she had to paint. By then, that sickening wee hours feeling had settled into her gut, where you can't quite decide whether you should sleep or just push through, and she felt the quick stabs of panic at the thought of tomorrow, when she'd actually have to function like a grown-up again. Her painting felt like nothing to her at that moment, and it was terrible. For 6 months, she'd been working on a series of dreamy landscapes to enter in the big competition at the gallery at the end. They were life to her, better than chocolate and fast red convertibles and sun on naked skin. In one, a parade of elephants marched through a narrow, dusty road while confused Arabs hung out of their windows and snatched their laughing children out of the way. Another looked like a brilliant lake high in the Alps, except what looked like a lake reflecting sky was really a huge hole in the landscape, with the distant mountains connected by a frail bridge of earth and dragons banking and swooping through the dizzying starlit gap. Her favorite so far was a painting of giant butterflies attacking a stampede of panicked rhinos, pummeling them with huge soft wings and carrying them off into the hazy sky. Now she was finishing a painting of the inside of a clock tower, where a blind old man hammered at the elephant-sized cogs while one lazy apprentice gazed out over a moonlit cityscape and another hung from the highest gears like a monkey, making faces at scattering birds. She'd poured her heart into it, laughing at the mischievous little boys and delighting in the details of the tiny, flashing bird wings, the domes of the city beyond, and the earnest focus of the old blind clockmaker. Now, in the dullness of sleep-deprived night, it was just shapes and colors. She settled into work on one of the boring parts, the shadowy back corners where ropes and gears and bells loomed indistinctly, painting with grim determination because this was the only time left to her, and the deadline was just days away. All right, back to work for me. This has been really good. I look forward to seeing more of you next time, and have a great afternoon. Bye. Ha! Hi, Kitty. Thanks.